Hello. Hello, Rob. Hey, Ella.
Hello, hello. How's it going? Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you loud and clear.
Amazing.
Hello, hello.
Up here on stage with James and Robert and Ella. We'll let people just filter in. Hey, everyone. Nice to be doing these again. It's been too long.
It really has been way too long.
And the reason is that we've been quite bogged down with the developments we're going to be talking about today. A variety of other things, getting Subnet 1 up and moving, fighting off the endless attacks, but coming through. Nice to see Mog. Hey, Terrence. Hey, Creative. At some point, maybe you can have you up on stage if you're willing. And I think we can start. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about the long-term plan for Opentensor, for Bittensor, for what we hope will be the DAO. This is almost like a boardroom meeting, a board of directors, because I know that many of you are holders of Tau. Hello, welcome to newcomers as well. So this is a bit of a presentation for the board. That really is the whole point of building open ownership systems. You guys run us, we don't run you. But of course, I'm sure you're interested in what we're building, and that's the point of this call. So we just posted a tweet here, lovely, written by one of the members of the Opentensor family, about how we are looking to abstract ourselves, or positioning ourselves as an abstraction above resource allocation markets. And that's not a position, it's reality. Human consensus is a mechanism for us to build systems of validation that can extract not just intelligence, but a variety of other types of digital commodities. And we've been really excited about this moment for a very long time, especially for the foundation, because we've gone through the stage of being the primary controllers of Bittensor. And we really strongly believe that it's time for there to be competition at our level. We have managed to run Subnet 1, Subnet 3, I think very well. And however, there's so much more that can be done. And most of you are familiar, obviously, with what Creative is building around Subnet 41, image-based understanding. We've been working on pre-training subnets, not yet ready to go, but it's in the pipes. Robert here is building a coding subnet. We have time series subnets. We have predictions similar to what Numerai is doing. We'd like to build a port of render network. All of these things sit underneath the abstraction of human consensus's ability to represent digital commodities in a validation game and allow people to be incentivized to produce it. So that's really what we're doing, and it's a bit like a step down from the Opentensor Foundation in the sense that we want people to come up. Well, maybe it's not a step down, so more of a letting people to come up to our level and build applications by registering subnets and then having full control. So that mechanism, I think it's a good time for us to talk about how we're going to build that system. And I'm gonna actually pass the mic here to Ala, and maybe Ala, you can interview me about that system, so it's more of a dialectic between the two of us here.
I like that. Solid idea, yeah. Okay, so you know what, Cons? I think it's important to list what subnets exist today first and what they're doing, and a little bit about how they work and how they interact, if they interact with each other at all. Can you please
Right.
just give us explain like on five on that one?
Sure. So everyone here is familiar with subnet 1. It's an incentive mechanism around the production of prompts by inferencing language models, which go through a reward system, and that drives the network to produce, well, millions and millions of inferences per day. It's quite phenomenal. That design is written via two major classes, the validator and the miner, which are the producer and the consumer of the digital commodity. That system runs on top of what's called a subnet on Bittensor. The subnet is a self-contained incentive mechanism or ecosystem where the validation of the miners is determined by the validators, who reach consensus over the production of those miners, in a nutshell. And we use human consensus, which is the way in which the miners come to agreement. I'm just going to turn off my WhatsApp there. Right now we have subnet 1. That's what I just explained. We have coming down the pipes, we also have a coding subnet, which means machine learning models that are specifically designed to produce fast inferences over code. We think this will be really valuable for a lot of people that are building applications, as it's the most used element in GPT, as well as on neural internet's front end, but specifically designed to do coding in our case. We're also going to direct subnets towards doing pre-training. We think this is really, really important. We can align the compute in Bittensor to train foundation models, and really compete with the giants at the computational problems that are out of the reach of the open source community. We bridge both, right? We're both open source and incentivized, so we get the benefits of the corporate structure and also the benefits of being open in the open source community. So pre-training is a huge one, and then I think final one, Arash might be on the call, .7 might be on the call, I'm not quite sure, but we have the beginnings of a time series prediction subnet, so where the outputs of the miners will be predictions on digital currencies, the prices, and we can validate that and drive a signal as a digital commodity into Bittensor. So that's a breakdown of what we're doing. Thanks, Al.
Nice, nicely done. That makes sense. So with this change, people are going to be able to create their own subnets. Is that right?
Yes. So this is like this is the major change that we're presenting today.
Right.
So in the tweet, we actually have the template there, which is a tutorial and allows people to go through the process of creating their own subnets with their own miners and validators pre-configured by themselves. Adapted by themselves, and run on the testnet, which is already launched as of yesterday. So people can go and manipulate their own resource allocation systems and apply them on the testnet and advertise them, and people can come and use them. These will be really live. They're live, except they're not. It's not real Tau. And this process of registering subnets is going to be a competitive process, where miners, teams that want to run subnets will need to lock Tau. A little bit like how the burn mechanism adapts to the rate at which new UIDs enter a subnet. There is a similar mechanism in place for the cost in terms of Tau that's required to be locked in order to attain a subnet on the testnet, and that's an adaptive process that will push the price up somewhat, a bit like a Dutch auction. We'll have more tutorials on this, in the coming weeks, so people can see that, because right now, obviously, the testnet Tau is not as valuable as main, and we want people to be doing this correctly.
Awesome. Could you give a little bit of a overview of how the emissions are going to work in these new subnets? Is it going to be basically us having to give people emissions manually, or is it going to be a little bit more automatic?
Yeah, so it's not automatic. Sorry, it is automatic. We're moving into an era for Bittensor where the delegates are going to have a lot of control, and this is by design. The delegates get to select, like validators in subnets, which subnets themselves are producing value for, you might say, the collective that is tau. By staking, if Mog Machine here, for instance, moves neural internet into a new subnet, he effectively places weight on that subnet, giving it the ability to mint tau. And if he doesn't, or the Opentensor Foundation doesn't move into these subnets by staking, they are pruned from the network as new entrants come through. It's very similar to the validation process we have in play on subnets, but it's for subnets themselves. The amount of emission will be proportional to the amount of stake that is on the subnets. So this creates a hyper-competitive system, not only because you will lose your registration slot as a subnet if you don't get validators staking to you, but also because the amount of emission in the subnet is proportional, and a portion of that will go to the controllers, the owners of the subnet.
That makes sense. And so then what's going to happen is anyone's going to have the ability to create a subnet, and then it becomes up to them to attract the validators in to basically help them run this subnet. Is that right?
Yeah, by producing value. So
by producing value, yes.
Yeah, and this is really, a call to action, both to people that are developers in this call, to get familiar with the way in which subnets are going to be able to be created on Bittensor, but also people that are holding tau and moving that around. It'll be very important for us as people that are delegating and delegates ourselves to select the subnets that we consider to be high value. We are effectively investing in the teams that are creating those subnets, and we're pushing Bittensor as an organism through to creating these new types of values. So it's really important. We have to vote correctly.
Right, that makes sense. So then, you that last sentence was interesting. You're saying we have to vote correctly. How do people vote on these changes?
By the delegates, either as delegates, there are a number of people here which are running large-scale validators. So moving your validators across into these subnets is a vote of confidence in the engineers that are building that subnet. So we're putting ourselves into that same category as the foundation. We're below the table, you might say. If you're not confident or not happy with what subnet 1 is producing or the other subnets that we're going to create, we want you to vote with your feet and move that stake across. So that's really the voting process for delegates. And then the people that are delegating through the staking operation will be selecting those delegates, which are, again, validating in those subnets. So if your delegate is not in the right subnet or you want them to go somewhere else, moving your stake will be the operation.
That makes sense. And then you mentioned training subnets as well. Is there a timeline on that one, and when we're going to move forward with that one?
You said the pre-training subnet?
Yeah.
We are going to be launching subnets on main within the next month. We'll be monitoring how this process moves on testnet. So we want people that are interested in this to start with that template that's at the bottom of the tweet thread, and will also be posted again, to create subnets and see how this operation behaves on tests before we move to main. Pre-train won't be launched until, obviously, they're available on main, and will likely be one of the first subnets to be created.
That makes sense. And then what does that say about as subnets are being created, right? And you can have different modalities within these subnets. Would there be a possible bridging between subnets eventually? Let's say that you want to create a network connection requirement between the subnets. Is that something people work on?
That's not a functionality that we have currently loaded, because we think that people should focus primarily on single subnets. We haven't had any luck ourselves with doing cross subnet interaction. They tend to behave very much like singular ecosystems of resource allocation and digital commodity creation. So for now, the main mechanisms available to people are the same mechanisms that the Opentensor Foundation has had up until now. Like I said, it's very much like a step up for everyone in this community and a step down for the
Right.
foundation. We will still be running this project as much as we can, and in no way are we not going to be able to run the project as much as we have. It's just that we're scaling horizontally. Instead of becoming a much larger institution that has thousands of employees and runs Bittensor, we are scaling horizontally out to allow people to create teams. And we'll be, as the foundation, we will be working our best to educate people on how to do these, how to create these subnets, and perhaps even providing funding for teams that are looking to create resource allocation systems on Bittensor.
Makes sense. So I think to put this into an SL analogy, it's sort of like we were one massive empire, and now we're sort of allowing people to split into their own sort of self-governed states in a way. Is that kind of a good way to think about it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that
It
makes
was
sense.
we were above the table, and now we're coming down below. So, David is coming up on the stage. If people would like to ask questions, you can also put them in the comment section. Hey, David.
Hey.
Hey.
Sorry, I just had a quick question on listing the token in the US. I know you guys had pulled it from MEXC and just wanted to know if there were any updates on that.
We neither pulled nor put the token on MEXC.
Got it.
Ala, did you want to say something?
No, yeah, you kind of nailed it on the head, Jake. Yes, so we don't get involved in these listings. This is largely a community-led effort, to be honest. So we don't really know anything about that side.
Got it. Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, David.
If there are other people who'd like to ask questions about this process, now's the time, or to put them in the comment section here.
So just to clarify, Jake, while people are coming up with questions, or before anybody raises their hand, that means that people who create subnets actually will have a over changing the hyperparameters of that subnet. Is that right? Similar to how we've been doing over the subnets that we have.
So we preloaded the hyperparameters on subnets to work for their size. So small subnets will have immunity periods and registration rates that match their subnet. Over time, the foundation, with the remaining power that we have, will implement mechanisms for people to change other hyperparameters, but we're going to do this in a slow way. We don't want to open the floodgates and see things get out of control, but we're going to open them slowly and let people manipulate single hyperparameters at a time. So that will allow people to really become familiar with the mechanism and not be overloaded with the complexity.
Right. That makes sense.
Zoro says, how will the miners work on the pre-training subnet? Okay, that's a great question, Zoro. So we have been testing the ability for miners to communicate weight matrices primarily, and then to validate the performance of those weight matrices on the loss of a very large unlabeled corpora. So you have to train a model using the weights from your peers, and then that gets evaluated, and that becomes the incentive that drives the miners to do that in the first place. We've tested this with just 10 miners right now, so we're a little ways away from having it really in production. But this is really, really exciting because if we can take the computational power that we have on subnet 1 and apply it to pre-training, we can really, really compete with the data warehouses, the computational warehouses that large companies have, like OpenAI. We think that as for incentivization, we can just take the models and give them over to subnet 1 and this could be So we're not so focused on the monetization of these models. We want to create the largest open source language models that compete with even Llama 80 billion and 100 billion. So that's really what our goal is to begin with, rather than building a demand side on the pre-training. We just want to use the network to create something that no one else has. All right, so there's more questions.
I see more in the comments. This from Why doesn't this just end with the Opentensor Foundation needing to build everything?
Sorry, wait. Ala, can you
Do you want
repeat
to take on that
that?
one, or should I take it on?
No, you got cut out. I got cut out. Can you still hear me?
Well,
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Let me just. Okay, I think I'm good. Ala, could you repeat the question?
yeah, I had a weird thing on my side too. Nick Holtz was asking, what are the incentives for teams to create new subnets? Why doesn't this just end with the Opentensor Foundation needing to build everything?
Why doesn't this just end? I'm not.
So effectively, why
I'm not
do we
sure I
need
understand.
subnets in the first place? What are their incentives? Why would somebody want to create a subnet
Yeah.
in the first place?
Well, there's many reasons why we want subnets to be created by all other organizations, and the first and most important one is because we have never wanted this system to be entirely controlled by the foundation. And we currently play a very important role in the nascent form of Bittensor. It makes sense, as we're growing, baby steps. We're growing out the mechanisms and understanding them, and we've built up a lot of domain knowledge. We've created something quite amazing with Subnet One. But because we don't want to be the monarchs of this system, we've opened up this same position that the Opentensor Foundation sits in to other participants in the network. Hey, so Nick is actually just going to come right up on stage. Hopefully Nick just says yes. Hey, Nick.
Hey, what I was trying to get at really is, why would somebody be incentivized to build a subnet? I get why we would want them to build subnets and for it to be decentralized.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say, like, why would somebody not just let somebody else do the work and then become a validator once the thing is built?
Yeah, no, I understand the question now. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so the subnet creators will take a proportion of the emission in that subnetwork for the work that they're doing. Now, we think that this is legitimate because for the first time ever there will be competition at that level and a cost to participate at that level in the system. So if they don't produce value as a team, they won't make that proportion of emission that comes out. And that proportion that we're using right now is 18, which is just the fair value that we think has been used in various places throughout Bittensor. So that 18% emission for subnets could be fairly lucrative for teams that are looking to build resource allocation mechanisms. So they could come in and perhaps even raise capital to build something on top of Bittensor.
Awesome. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries.
Jake, I think Creative has mentioned that he's good to hop onto the space to talk about his image subnets if we wanted to.
Done. Are there any more
Yeah,
questions? You want to just keep on reading me the questions, Al?
That's what I've been doing. It's kind of sifting through. We've got a few more minutes for a couple more questions. Okay, so this is actually a good question coming from, going to butcher this one, Grizzly Bomir. What is going to be the main development focus of the Opentensor team if the effort to create and govern new subnets is shifted to the external teams in the community?
I think primarily it will be maintaining the subnets that we will be running. So we'll be competing at the same level as the other participants. Now, because we have a lot of incentive ourselves to make sure that these subnets are successful. We will be educating primarily. I think that that's something that our major push in scaling is going to be education and helping people build these subnets and doing them properly. It's a fairly involved process. It's trickier than the simplicity that of writing them. So that will be our primary role. We still will be running subnet 1, subnet 3, and subnet 11. However, for the first time ever, those will be under competition from competitors in a horizontal manner. So our role won't change much. It's more that the role of other participants in the system will be elevated.
That makes sense.
So I'm adding Savith up here if he wants to ask his question in person. Hey, Savith, you're muted, but feel free to speak. Okay. Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I actually want to ask, like, if you're building a subnet on Bittensor, like, how it's actually going to uh, value the proposition through the evaluators or the validators, kind of, because I am
Yeah. This
building
is
a kind of a chain through proof of code where people code and we evaluate. I just want to know, like, I'm
yeah.
intrigued by it. Yeah.
That's a question, and that's really the problem that needs to be solved by the teams that are building these mechanisms. Now, there's a variety of ways of constructing the consensus validation process, and that's written in Python on the validator side. It's the way in which they get the responses and say, well, this is a positive or a negative, the way in which that those scores are normalized, the way that they're set to the chain. That's really open to Bittensor is a very abstract layer around consensus. It allows us to write it in Python off chain and then use human consensus, which is the hard protocol on the chain, to mediate the interaction between the participants. So if you're doing, it sounds like you're doing code generation validation, you can have the validators run the code generation through a Docker instance or a virtual machine that's running on the validator side to check the validity of the process. I'm not sure exactly what your process is, but that sounds like how I would do it. And Robert here, who's on the stage, can probably speak to you, at length about the way in which that's being done because he's currently focusing on a similar problem.
Can we take the data off chain and verify it through some
Yes.
snark proof or stack proof? Will it be
Yes.
possible on Opentensor?
Yes, exactly. And that's really the benefit of using Bittensor's human consensus, because if you were to try to do that on chain, it would be too expensive for basically any blockchain to run arbitrary programs that are not Turing complete and potentially incredibly large, and to validate them many times over a sequence of transactions. We focused initially on validating machine intelligence, which was probably the most difficult thing that we could ever validate, and we were able to do that with Bittensor's core mechanism. So I think that when it comes to more simple, concrete logic, concrete answer validation mechanisms like the one you're describing, it's very possible to write, and we'll be happy to help you write those mechanisms.
Yeah, we have a team of 60 people already in our View Foundation. So, like, if we want to build an EVM client for Bittensor or something, like how we can approach or something. So I just
Yeah.
want to know that.
I'll let me know through the Discord. Ask that question, and we can see if we can get answers to you. So thanks for your questions, Save. Okay, so there's a couple more questions here. These are actually great questions, guys. I'm really happy with these. Battle Cash has said, how much tau locked will be necessary to create a subnet? The answer is that it's adaptive. It's the same thing as asking how much would a burn cost to register a UID on subnet 1 or 3. As there's more demand to create subnets, the amount to lock will increase. That will be determined at a later date, honestly, what that price will be. You will get the tau back if you're deregistered. So so people that are really truly interested in doing that, there won't be too much capital risk. So can there be multiple, let's say, text to image subnets, and can we choose by stake? Exactly. So Bittensor asked that question, and that's exactly what we want to create here with the competition at this level. So if there's someone doing text to image in a very effective way, the delegates will be able to select that subnet as the one that they want to promote. If there's competition, perhaps there's something that text to image 2 will do better than text to image 1. That's to be seen. So creative, you'll have some competition. Do you plan to have a render or a cache subnetwork? I'm not sure yet. I'm not positive if the validation process of a cache can be easily ported into Bittensor, but it's a very good question. Something to certainly look at. Ala, perhaps you could read the questions.
Yeah,
Is there any
yeah, I've been
more?
looking through.
Please. Well, you can come up on stage.
Yeah, if there's anybody, please come up on stage. Else, let me see. Nova is also asking about multi-GPU support for an ETF for that. Still a work in progress, so not really kind of focused on that just yet, but stay tuned on that one.
Novus, you can write your own multi-GPU support using the Bittensor API. We're trying as much as possible to become a shallow protocol, especially with the API on Python. We don't want to make any opinionated decisions about how the miners are being written at that level. So multi GPU support is really just a process of using Torch distributed and then taking the requests off the wire and shuttling them to the proper processes.
There's also a question about the distribution of emissions that's happening at the moment. Folks are asking why subnet 11 only has 7% of emissions and hasn't been increased. I want to say this is largely because this subnet change is incoming, and that will likely change emissions as validators join different subnets. So subnet 11 having 7% likely will become a little bit less relevant as more and more emissions are shifted away from subnet 1 and into the new subnets. And that's all going to be controlled, by you guys, no longer controlled by us completely.
Answer to Mog here. You mentioned that there will be no native bridging between subnets. However, an API solution could allow developers to access multimodality across subnets through apps built on that API. So yes, I totally agree, Mog. From that perspective, there's bridging for sure. If you own Tau, you have access to all of these subnets, and that's just the way in which it was built. So if that's the bridging you mean, then that makes sense. And really, that's the only bridging we need. So miners can do the same thing. They can run on one subnet and use the outputs of another. We've already seen that on S11 to S1, sorry, S3 to S1. What are your thoughts on creating some type of decentralized social media platform? Haven't thought about that actually.
That'd be
I
fun.
think, yeah, I've thought a lot about what we could do to scrape data from other social media platforms, and that would be really the fundamental value of any social media platform. So that's something that can be built, and I hope to build myself on Bittensor at a later date. And that having the data is really what creates a social media platform in the first place. So creating forks of the larger platforms would be something that's a goal of mine. What is currently being done to mitigate the tax capitalization on particular subnets? What can be done to prevent this kind of actions on the community create subnets? It's really going to be a process of getting better, learning how to control and steer these subnets. I think we've gotten a lot better at this ourselves within the foundation. That's why we will continue to do what we're doing right now, honing and perfecting the incentives on subnet one. Has exponentiated many aspects of that subnet, making it much more valuable. But also, we've had to take a couple of hits to learn new things. Cameron says, I probably missed it, but how is the emission per new subnet decided? So 18% will go to the creators of the subnets to run the subnet, 41 to validators, and 41 to miners. The amount is currently just a clear division by the total stake across all subnets. So if all 10 subnets, for instance, have all stake, let's say there's 10 million tau on each subnet, that's 100 million in total, and then each would get 1/10. So that would be 1/10 of emission for each of the subnets. So having the delegates come to your subnet and validate them, it will really be the promotional aspect of being a subnet creator. You want to get that attention. Yeah, great. Is that everything?
Looks like it. I haven't seen any questions on
How is this
my
project
side that I
funding
missed.
itself if it never raised money? We
That's
get this
already been
question a
answered,
lot.
Const. I already answered that in the thread itself.
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Creative, would you like to end the call with a little spiel on what you're building with subnet 41?
Sure. Yeah, so as everyone knows, you guys can hear me, right? My mic doesn't say it's lighting
Yeah, we
up,
got you.
but okay, cool. As everyone knows, I've been working on Tau Studio on the testnet there. And on the testnet, it's subnet 64, if anyone would like to hop on. But been building out the image subnet, which is technically on Consta's GitHub. And I can put a link to that in the GitHub, in the Discord after the call is done, if anyone's interested. But basically, all it does is takes a prompt, takes width and height. Those are the main attributes of a request. And then that's sent to the miners. And currently, the main miner file is just built off Stable Diffusion. So if you have any custom Stable Diffusion models, feel free to put them up on the image subnet, and they'll be validated. And the way the validator process works is it has like 3 different features to it. So it's basically validating on the aesthetic of the image, how close the image ranks to the prompt, and then how diverse the image is. So if miners are responding with the same style across multiple miners in the same request, they'll be penalized for that. So you're going to want to have a diverse collection of styles that you can respond with while still matching the actual prompt of the request. But yeah, that should be coming out soon here, so stay tuned.
I was muted.
Amazing.
Very excited to see that, Creative. I think that without further ado, we'll end the call here at 41 minutes. It was awesome. Lots of great questions. We were really happy to release this for people. If you have some developers out there that you think that would be interested in this, let them know. And thanks to everyone for coming. Have a good evening.
See you guys.